Here we go. Are you ready? All right. A couple weeks ago, I put a poll on my Instagram asking what you all would like to hear for a free webinar. And this was one of the many submissions that came through. And I not only get submissions like this whenever I ask questions about what people want coaching on, but I also have a lot of clients end up coming to work with me because they don't believe that they are enough. So the submission to the poll on Instagram specifically was, why am I not enough? Always trying to get validation and reassurance from family and friends. I need it and crave it. So we're going to talk a little bit about this today. The challenging thing with this topic is that it can go in a multitude of directions because not everybody has the same beliefs around their enoughness, right? That means something different to each individual person. And while there might be similarities, there's a wild variety. So I did my best to keep us going down one specific path so that it can apply to everyone, but just know that you will still have some of your own unique experiences, and you may even feel like I'm not touching on everything you experience just because it's very hard to address this with every single person's individual beliefs. But I did my best. So I'm going to try to walk you through why this happened, how to go about it, and really just why we think that we're not enough. Okay, you ready? And by the way, let me get this little thing so I don't keep doing that. By the way, I won't be checking any questions until the end, so just save any questions that come up for the end, and whenever I'm done with my little presentation over here, I will check the Q&As and answer any questions that you have. Sound good? I'm also going to grab a tissue because I can feel my nose wanting to drip. Okay. Here we go. I'm also very visual. So if you've never been to one of my webinars, welcome. By the way, I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Macie Renae. I am an emotional intelligence coach, and I help people build up their emotional intelligence, their emotional safety, emotional resilience, all things emotions. So if you don't like emotions, but you want to work on them, I'm your girl. I definitely didn't like them whenever I first learned even what like feeling your feelings meant. And then whenever I started doing the work, my whole entire life changed. And that's what inspired me to become a coach and why I do the type of coaching that I do today. Forgot to say that in the beginning. Okay, so here's something that's very important to think about whenever you are struggling with why am I not enough? I want you to ask yourself the question, what specifically doesn't feel like enough? Okay, as I said earlier, this can mean something different for every single person. It can start with things that happened in childhood not being enough based on what your parents' expectations were of you. It could be career-wise, right? Like maybe you are a woman in a male-dominated field, or maybe you're, if a man ever watches this, a man in a woman-dominated field, and you might not feel like enough in that field based on the people that are surrounding you. It could be body image. So we are surrounded by filters and social media and a lot of societal expectations placed on how people think that we should or shouldn't look. And so you might not feel like enough based on societal standards with the body, right? Or health. It could be relationship related. Maybe someone told you weren't enough. Maybe there was infidelity. Maybe there was betrayal in some way. And so you might even be struggling with what enough looks like in relationship. It could be based on your socioeconomic status. Right? It could be if you have a lot of money, if you have little money, if you're somewhere in the middle. People can have a lot of enoughness or not enoughness mind drama based on that, or even career accolades. And even it can come down to like family acceptance or cultural differences, right? Like interracial families and things, of that nature, just because you might have different cultural beliefs and all the above. Okay. So again, it's not just one type of what makes someone feel like enough or not enough. can be multiple things, and asking the question, what specifically doesn't feel like enough, is very powerful because your brain has its own definition of that. Okay? So I just want you to be thinking of that as we go through this together. Okay. So what does it mean to be good enough? I think a lot of times at a soul level, not saying on our conscious level, but at a soul level, we inherently know that we are enough, right? Like there's nothing that we actually really need to change. And I think there is this inner deep knowing of that. But I think on a surface level, especially when you're, looking around, observing, taking in the world, you may not feel like you're actually enough. So even if you inherently or logically grasp that you are, it can be true that you don't believe it yet. Like you don't feel like you've gained evidence for whether you are enough or not enough. And we're going to discuss why. Okay, so there are a few different reasons. One, a sneaky subconscious manual of what good enough means. If you're new to my world, you maybe have not heard me use this phrase, but a manual is essentially like this invisible kind of playbook or rule book in which you think people should behave, think, speak, act, how they should navigate the world. And it really comes down to the way that you navigate the world to feel good or to feel better. So when people don't follow your manual or you don't follow other people's manuals, they may have a lot of thoughts about it, and it may feel very uncomfortable because they have this invisible book rules that live inside of the brain. Okay. And so it's the same reason why you may not feel good enough. You have this manual of what good enough means. You don't feel that you're meeting your own manual for good enough. It can also be an invisible standard your brain thinks it should meet. So it thinks it should meet it. Just notice how I said that. It doesn't mean that it's true, but it thinks that it should be met. And one of the last things is you have maybe this list, and it can again be this invisible kind of list of qualities or rules that you believe must obtain or must reach to obtain the label of good enough. Okay, so it kind of goes with the manual, but it's a whole list of things where you're like, if this, then I would be good enough, right? If that, then I would be good enough. And so it's good to observe what your brain thinks those rules, qualities, manual should be around enoughness. Again, the tricky part is that it makes it different for every single person. And that's how we know not enoughness is not true, right? Because it's different for every single person. Yes, there may be similarities, but if you go and ask each individual person, they may have different answers because it's all perception. So it's vital to remember that the manual, the standards, the qualities, the rules, they're all made up in your brain. So even if they feel extremely true, and I would imagine that if you are struggling with this in your life, right, and really having a hard time believing that you are enough, your brain just really, it's fighting to believe it's true that you are not enough. And we're going to get into some of the reasons why. But that is something to remember, okay, that it's all perception. It's all made up by your brain of what enoughness even means. Okay, if you have a pen and paper, or you have the ability to snapshot anything from this webinar, let it be now, because these are going to be very good questions. If you are a current client of mine, I've seen some names. I know some of you are current clients. If you're, someone that goes to therapy or someone thinking about doing coaching on this very topic, these are going to be really good journal questions to acknowledge and to think about and to write down and answer. So that way you can get to this work, the root of kind of what's going on. So I'm going to read them aloud. Okay. Good enough in my mind looks like or means blank. So what you would do is you would write a list of what good enough in your own mind looks like or what it means. Okay. And you can just have a whole list of what it means. The next one is I don't feel good enough when, whatever you want to insert there. And again, it could be a whole list of things. When do you not feel good enough? What specific things are happening or are you experiencing when you notice in your body, you're like, I do not feel good enough right now. And then the last one, if blank changed, I would feel good enough because. So I want you to also fill in what you think needs to change. So like, for instance, if my money changed, I would feel good enough because I'd feel safe, right? Or whatever it is. And so you can have, again, a whole list of if my body changed, I would feel good enough because so-and-so might like me or find me attractive, right? Whatever it is. Write a list of all of these things. If you're a current client that wants to dive into what comes up for you, we will do that. If you like I said, go to therapy or end up hiring a coach, these are really good questions and things to dive into. So many times your enoughness is being built from comparison. So let's just think about this for a second. When you feel like you are enough or you're not enough, specifically when you feel like you're not enough, you're usually looking outwardly at something else, someone else, something outside of yourself, something external, and you're comparing it to your actual experience. So you can look at someone with a really big, nice house, right? And then immediately have the feeling of insufficiency and feeling like it's not enough. And you might think in order to feel like I have enough, right? Or there's an abundance, I need a house like that, right? It could be someone's body. You look at someone's body and you feel again some sort of emotion, like you start feeling insecure maybe. And you think, okay, if I, hold on, let me check and make sure everyone can hear me still. The audio is patchy. Cutting out. Is it cutting out for anybody else? We'll take just a quick hiatus, just in case. And I can switch to my podcast mic. Let me know, you guys, real quick. How are we doing on audio? Still choppy, not cutting on. Okay, I'm gonna try something. Let me post it if it works better. Okay, hang on just a second. Because I want everybody to be able to hear, whether it's live or the replay. All right, can you all hear me better now? Is this better? Yes. Yes. Okay. We're going to do the podcast mic. All right, let's do that. Let me take this thing off. All right, and let me go back here. Fix that. Thank you for your patience. Tech has not been my friend this month. But I've just been rolling with it. Okay, so let me just kind of start from the beginning again, just in case it was a little bit choppy. So many times your enoughness is being built from comparison. You're looking at something external that someone else has or something that you want. And a lot of times it's because of a feeling you desire to have, and you think you're not enough without the thing that they have. So your brain takes in outer information and compares it with your inner experience. And what that really just means is that you look, let's say, at someone's body, you have a negative emotion about it, you start, having your brain give you a lot of stories and a lot of mind drama about what it would feel like to have the body or have the money or have the things. And it basically says we're not enough without that thing, okay? So that's a big way that this shows up for people who are maybe not feeling like they have enough. You've also maybe assumed based on your observation and your perspective, that's so important, that they are experiencing more pleasant emotions. So this is a tricky thing that our brain sometimes does, where it sees someone's outer lived experience and it creates all of these internal stories that somehow they have it easier, they have it better, that there's no struggles. And while again, we can inherently and logically know that that is not necessarily true, our brain fights so hard when we're in comparison to think that if we had their life or their thing or whatever it is that we're comparing to, that everything would feel better within us. And I just want to offer you that that is not necessarily true, okay? All right, let me just double check that all is good with the sound. Okay, great. I'm glad that that is working better. All right, so I even did a craft. All right, so here is really, in my opinion, this is kind of what I've seen over 5 years of coaching, and even in my own work of what I call with my clients, like peeling the onion, right? Like anytime we start working together, I'm like, basically you're an onion that has all of the shell on, and piece by piece, we're going to start ripping off that little flaky, kind of covering, and then we're going to start peeling the layers of the onion. And it's not the most fun experience. Not everybody wants to do it because of, all of the emotions you endure in doing that, but it is very, very helpful. And I think what happens, so look at this, how clever am I? I can even move this. When we are born and when we're just starting out, we're born exactly as we are, 100% authentic, who we are, unique to the world. We have all our own qualities and quirks and the things that make us uniquely us. But here is what's interesting. You are born into a family, right? And for a lot of people, they're not always emotionally self-aware. They don't always take care of their mental health at the highest level. They don't always know how to process their emotions. They don't know mindset, right? And so there might be different levels of this in different families based on their background, their experience, their own desires. But for a lot of people, you're just navigating the world down from subconscious patterns that were ingrained in you. So like starting with great-grandparents, whoever they were, a lot of their traits and qualities will be passed down to the grandkids, right? And then those grandparents become parents, and then the parents, and then the kids, and then, it goes on and on and on. It's a whole cycle. So what I mean by this is like when you are first born, you're 100% authentically you. Nobody has told you to be any different yet. And you show up as you are. But here is what happens for people that are raising us or teachers teaching us, right? It doesn't matter, like all of the people who influence us throughout our entire life, they are operating from their own perceptions, their own hurts, their own traumas, their own manuals, their own rules, their own mental health, and their own emotional ability to process. And when you're being your full-blown spirit and 100% authentically you, not everybody has the capacity to handle it. So rather than that individual taking responsibility, recognizing that, they're like, oh, maybe, I'm getting annoyed by this, or why am I so triggered by this? Instead of that, what we tend to do is tell the person that we think is triggering us to be different than who they are. Right? So think about if you've ever done this, and just go ahead and forgive yourself if you have, or you've experienced this, where, let's just say a kid is just being rambunctious and wild, and they're jumping on the couch, and they have all of this energy, and they talk to every stranger, and you have this manual that's just not what you do. You need to be calm. You need to, like, it's making me anxious when you're so this, and you're so that, and you're talking to strangers, you in your own discomfort or anything that maybe you haven't managed will inadvertently and subconsciously tell that kiddo what your manual is. Now, here's the interesting thing. That kiddo who is seeking love, who is wanting to be approved upon, who doesn't want to risk the relationship, as you are maybe their safe place, they will hear that feedback, and it all happens subconsciously, and they will be like, okay, I can dial it down a notch, right? This is what happens. I'll dial it down a notch. And so we do this, right? Throughout childhood, every single time this kind of happens, you start dialing yourself down just to make sure like you still are accepted, approved upon, loved. You don't get like, we as humans are tribal, right? We want to be loved and accepted. We don't want to be kicked out of our safety groups. So if there is anything that we're doing that is pointed out to us as being something, that someone else that we love might put us on exile island, essentially, we get really scared and we're like, okay. So this is kind of where people pleasing starts, and it can start as young as childhood. It can, but really at any time it can start, right? Where you start to kind of dial yourself down or water yourself down and not show up as authentically as who you were when you were born, right? Because people have manuals around how they want to feel good operating around you. And this is all coming from their own like lack of self-awareness as well. So then you start dating, right? And maybe your partner is like, oh, I really like, I don't know, I kind of like it more when you're like this, or when you dress like this, or when you look like this, or when you are at this weight, right? Or whatever. Like they have their own thinking and perceptions. And if you want their approval, if you want their love, if your subconscious tribal brain, right, your kind of animal brain that we were born with back in the caveman days, doesn't want to be evicted from that whole tribe, right? Again, you kind of water yourself down, and you water yourself down, and you water yourself down, and you water yourself down. And before you know it, you're in what I would call the danger zone, where you don't know who you are anymore without anybody else's manuals of who they think you should be. And it leads to a lot of confusion and ultimately depletion, right? Where you feel depleted because you're like, what else could you possibly want from me? I don't understand. Like, I'm doing everything. I feel like I'm showing up the way that you want me to. I'm trying, and I don't understand why you still don't approve of me or love me or accept me or show me the affection that I'm wanting. And so in exchange for wanting to feel approved upon and wanting to emotionally feel safe, loved, taken care of, you have ultimately, a lot of times for people in their life, doled themselves down, and they don't feel or operate in their authenticity anymore. And that completely depletes them because they're not operating in the world the way that they were designed to be, right? And that's a very heavy thing. And that is where, if you're a people pleaser, you've done this, right? People pleasing is going from your authentic answers, your authentic, experiences, your authentic personality, and being so afraid that it's going to rock the boat that you're like, okay, and you eventually get to a point where you're like, oh, I'm so resentful towards them, but so mad at myself that I have put myself in this position where I don't like the way that I'm showing up. And of course you don't, because it's not authentic you, right? So it's a very heavy experience to have. And then what this leads to, okay, this is how this leads to seeking validation in other people. The reason that you need to seek any sort of validation in another person is because you've disconnected yourself from you and your authenticity so much that you aren't even sure how to show up and be without someone else's validation, right? At work, with your boss, with a partner, with a parent, with a brother, with a sister, an aunt, an uncle, it doesn't even matter, right? It could be your coach, your therapist. Like, you want validation that you're doing a good job, right? Or that you're doing all the right things. But what it's really coming from is like not trusting yourself, because you have dimmed yourself or watered yourself down so much over the years that now you're like, I don't even know who I am unless people are telling me I'm doing a good job. I don't even know who I am unless people are reassuring me that I'm doing a good job, because I've lost my ability to trust my answers and my compass because I've traded the temporary emotional experience of love or assurance or reassurance or, being accepted for, this temporary kind of validation or reassurance. And so what happens is, I've got my little arrow. If you are validated by someone, you feel great. You feel in a good mood. You feel like you're on track. That's why you want it so bad, right? You're like, oh, okay, I am doing a good job. Thank you so much. And everything gets to be good in the world when people are validating you, when you're no longer showing up as your authentic self. But what happens when they don't? When they're not validating you, your mood goes significantly down. You feel like you're not worthy. You feel like you're not enough. And it's not because you're not enough. It's because you have sought out your answers from other people to temporarily feel the emotions of feeling validated, feeling good. Okay, so it has actually nothing to do with whether or not you're enough. Enough is made up by you. Enough is made up by someone else's manual of what they think enough is. You have been fighting for your survival and approval of them, and you've probably changed who you are and how you operate in the world to get it. So when you're operating from depletion and not knowing who you are at your core or what you want, you then seek validation and reassurance because it's the only compass you have at this time for knowing if you're doing things right or if you're not. Does that make sense? And that's why it feels like such a heavy, like, bleh thing, okay? Because it's not how you're meant to operate in the world. You've given all your power away. You've given your control to the person who does or doesn't validate you, who does or doesn't reassure you. And that's all based on their own manual of whether they want to or whether they don't. And so it's a very powerless place to be. And it's why it feels so freaking painful. And one of the reasons why it feels really hard to change, because this is what needs to happen. So how do you change this behavior and this thinking? The first thing is you have to deconstruct what it means to be enough. Go back to that journal page, okay, that I shared, and I might go back and just show it again in case you need it, but deconstruct what it means to be enough, okay? And then you need to build and improve your self-awareness. So even understanding, like right now, being on a webinar where you start to understand, why is this happening? That increases your self-awareness. That gives you the power and ability to say, okay, now with this self-awareness, do I want to change this, right? And from self-awareness, you also need to improve your emotional safety. You have to learn how to build that emotional resilience and safety within yourself so that you don't need external validation and reassurance and approval. Like, you have to come back to your authentic self in order to change this. And probably the most important thing of all is you have to forgive yourself for what has created this. So again, it could be your parents unintentionally, right? Grandparents, it could be teachers, people that you loved, like sports coaches that you wanted to, wanted their approval so bad. You wanted to win. You wanted them to tell you that you were the best. It can be anything like that. So you're going to have to forgive yourself for what created it. And then the most important part is you now need to take responsibility for showing yourself enough love to change it. Hating yourself to change does not create lasting change. It can create temporary change if you hate something enough that you change it. But a lot of times, if you hate yourself into change, so like if you're like, I hate my body, I hate my body, I hate my body, and you go work out, a lot of times you're going to be on the pattern of, I work out and then I quit, and then I eat good and I lose a few pounds and then I quit, right? It's not going to be this consistent, sustainable practice because you're doing it from hatred, and hatred doesn't change anything. Look at the world, right? Love is the most powerful emotion for changing things. So you have to love your body into the change, right? You have to love yourself and your body so much that you would choose to feed it better, or choose to work out, or choose differently, right? Choose to work on your mind, choose, like, it comes from love. That's what creates lasting change. So forgive whatever has created this idea that you're not enough, because that may not be your fault. It may be from all of the programming and conditioning and the lack of awareness you had, your parents had, your grandparents had, your great grandparents had. Okay, it can be from anybody that you've interacted with in the world. But once you become aware of it, is so important to take responsibility as the adult you are now and decide that you are going to love yourself enough to change it. Okay, only you can do that. We can't, like, the control is not in the person who caused it. Like, they may never change who they're being or ever gain the awareness. It's now your job. So feel free to start asking any questions you have, but here is how I want to wrap this up. Your brain, your mind is the house that you live in 24/7. Okay. This is your home. This is your home, your permanent residence. Okay. And I saw this quote today scrolling on Instagram, and I thought it was perfect for this webinar. And it says, "You're the most permanent thing in your life. Choose you always." And it is so true. Like, you are the most permanent thing in your life. This is where you live. So how you take care of it and what you think about yourself is so important, because your brain creates everything. Everything that you experience in your life, everything that you make happen, everything that is possible or impossible comes from how you think and how you operate in your brain. So if any of this resonated with you and you feel that you want to work on this further, this is what I recommend. If you've already had a consult and you just have a few questions, you can either ask them here or you can email coaching@macierenae.com, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Or one of the best ways is to go to macierenae.com and sign up for a free 60-minute consult. If you want to talk any of this through based on specific things that you have that I didn't cover, if you want us to kind of go through what's going on in your life, what's creating maybe some turmoil or just some discomfort that you want to work on changing, we can discuss all of that in a consult and then decide if coaching would be something that you want to work through together. And then really quickly, I work with clients as of right now. It's June of 2023. I work with clients one-on-one, where we meet every week on Zoom. I have the Foundational Emotional Intelligence program called the Equip Society. That's lifetime access. You pay once. You have lifetime access to all of the modules in there to build your emotional intelligence at your own pace. And then you can come for weekly life coaching. Or there is the hybrid experience, which I consider the creme de la creme of coaching of my offers. And that is a whole experience of advanced emotional intelligence skills, right? That is like when you're ready to kick your own ass. I'll just be honest. And when you're so, and I'm going to say it, fucking done with yourself and all your bullshit. Whenever you get to that level, the hybrid experience is a really great experience. You get one-on-one coaching with me, you get group coaching, and then you come with myself and all of your peers in person for a luxury retreat at the end of the 6 months. And the skills that you master in there, however many times you need to go through that program to get it, it's all what, like, those skills are really what will help change your life, but it is advanced. And I know that not everybody is probably ready for the level of advancement of that program. So if you have questions, this is one of the best ways to kind of talk through what you've got going on, and I can just guide you based on what you're needing, of whether one-on-one, group, lifetime access, or the hybrid experience is going to be the most beneficial. And I'll be super honest about it. If I don't think you're going to fit in something, or it's going to be too much or too overwhelming based on your current status, I will let you know, because I want you to be able to thrive in whatever you decide to do. All right. So let me look at any questions that are coming up. Anybody have questions for me based on this webinar? And I will leave this up just in case. And I'm also going to go back to the journal page, just in case you want to take a snapshot or you joined late. Because again, answering these questions, so vital. Like, make a list. I've coached a lot of people, from people personally through people business, things that they're getting stuck on. And almost always when people make a very thorough, detailed list, we can find exactly why they're believing they're not enough, right? And it's usually something so left field from what they thought it would be. And it makes it like this fixable, not always easy, but I would say simple fix. Because a lot of times our brain is so sneaky with what we think is actually enough. So I would definitely recommend filling this out for yourself, even looking at it if you don't have a coach or a therapist or someone to kind of work through it with you. It's such good knowledge even to have for yourself. Okay. All right. What questions can I answer for you, if anything? Okay, let's see. When answering these journal prompts, would you have a specific area of life in mind? That is a great question. I would do it one instinctively, like when you first hear these questions, what instinctively do you go to? But then if you want to get even more specific and do it in a specific area of your life, yes. Because a lot of times there can be sneaky things hiding in our brain, right? So like, for instance, I might have a perception of these questions when it comes to money or my business. I may also have a perception of how, a whole different way of answering these when it comes to, like my family life or relationship, or, if you have a job and a boss or something like that. Like, you probably have some different examples of each. So if it helps you to categorize that, I would definitely recommend it. Okay, I see some hands raised, but I don't think I have the ability to like call on you like a normal Zoom, just with the way the webinar is structured. So if you have another question, there is a Q&A at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and you can go in and answer any of, or you can go and ask any questions you have, and I will answer them. What else? I have plenty of time to answer any questions. So I'll give it another minute or two if you want to think about it. Was this helpful? Did this help kind of sort through the whole not enoughness story? Again, it's tricky to solve it in a webinar because everybody's answers for these prompts would be different. And to be honest, for every way that you answer it, it goes down a different rabbit hole, right? For some people, it could be because they're people pleasing. For some people, it could be a trauma-based response because they were hurt at some point in their life or relationship. For other people, it could be a totally different thing. So because of that, it can be a very messy topic to get into, and keeping it on the straight and narrow so that you even understand why it may be coming up, I thought would be the most beneficial. But again, if you want to work on this together, you can always reach out to me, sign up for a consult, and I'm happy we can discuss kind of what came up for you. So, all right, I don't know that anybody else has questions, so I am going to end this. If not, and oh no, wait, another one came through. Apart from journal prompts and getting clear on this, how else can we build ourselves back up? My honest answer is to get help working through it. Truly. I mean, there are a million, like, for free wise, right? You can go through maybe like self-worth podcasts. You can search things like self-worth on Google, or, enoughness. You can probably find YouTube things. Like, there are probably a plethora of resources for free where maybe you can get more information. But when it comes to peeling back the layers of like, why is it like this for me specifically, and how do I go about changing it? And then the most important question, who do I have to become in order to walk myself through and believe in my enoughness without everybody else? That takes a little bit more, I think, assistance for someone to see inside of your brain as to what's happening so you stay on track. And so I would recommend a therapist, a coach, some sort of professional that can help you through this actual work if you're doing this self-sufficient stuff and it just doesn't feel like you're getting anywhere. So if you're able to walk yourself through this on your own and build up your enoughness and you feel good about it, that's fabulous. But if you are still struggling and it's just not going anywhere based on the resources that you found or even working through this, I would recommend to hire someone that can help you with this, because a lot of this comes from Our enoughness, again, is based on emotions that we think we would feel when we get to enough, right? So I want to feel secure. I want to feel validated. I want to feel loved. I want to feel all of these things. There's a need emotionally that you think lies in something or someone else. And you think that until you get it, you're not worthy or you're not enough. Okay, and so you have to address where that's coming from. Why is it coming like that? And then who do you have to be and what do you have to work on within yourself to create that safety, to create those emotions without the codependence of someone else? Because even if someone made you feel not enough, one, nobody can ever make us feel a type of way without our permission. It's a safety mechanism, right? It's like they did something, they said something, we had an emotional experience over what they did or what they said. We made stories in our mind of like, oh, they must think that I'm not this, or they must think I'm not that. And we make up these stories that were not enough because of their manual, their perception, their experience, right? And then we take it and we create all of these stories about ourselves. And again, the worst part that is just so sad is like to please them, to be enough. Like if you're fighting for someone's attention, it could be like your ex, right? Or a toxic relationship with a parent, like you so badly want them to approve of you that instead of showing up as your authentic self, you ultimately conform. You conform to get an emotional need met that you don't feel you have the capacity to meet yourself. So it's a blend of like your own emotional safety, but emotional intelligence, right? Like how you show up like in your life when your emotions are involved. And for people that people please or want approval, they're like, oh my God, their approval is everything to me. Their, validation is everything to me, reassurance. But it's not because of any sort of enoughness or lack thereof. It's because you over time have conformed, right? And watered your authenticity down to be what someone else needed in their manual, or so they could manage their own emotions. Basically, you need to be different so I can manage my emotions. That's what we inadvertently do. We don't even do it consciously. It's not always this like intentional toxic thing. It's like when a kid is bouncing off the walls and you're finally like you hit like a breaking point of sensory overload and you're like, I can't handle it, and you just like lose your mind and scare the living daylights out of them. And then they're like, I need to be more like quiet and meek around my mom, around my dad, so that they don't lose it on me. Like I want their approval. And we don't even realize all of the tiny ways that this happens and waters ourselves down from who we are. And then when you no longer know who you are, you're depleted, and then you rely on that validation and reassurance. And it just continues a cycle. It's like, I need that from my boss. I need it from my friends. I need it from my parents. I need it from this person. And you don't. You just need to create, again, that emotionally, like that emotional safety inside of yourself in order to change it. Let's see. My issue is I don't feel good enough because of infidelity. How do you work through that? It's hard to believe it will not happen again. Why wasn't I loved like other people are? And those kind of feelings all of the time. Yeah. So when it comes to like relationship issues, you have to remember this thing too. Again, like infidelity was their choice. And when they made that choice, what your brain made it mean is I'm obviously not enough, right? If I was enough, that person wouldn't have engaged in that behavior. But that is not true. There's a whole different thing guiding their behavior, right? Because if you go back, if you followed me for a while, you'll probably have heard this. If you haven't, this may be new. But it's never the circumstance. It's always the thoughts. So like that person, that partner had thoughts, whatever those thoughts are. You can't be in control of those thoughts. Their thoughts are not your fault. It's nothing you did or didn't do. They are responsible for what's going on in between their ears, right? Their thoughts. When they had whatever thoughts that they had, we have no idea what those are. Then they created an emotion in their body. Okay. And whatever that emotion was in their body, our actions, everything that we do is based on how we feel. So emotionally, based on how that person felt, based on what they generated in their mind, stories, whether true or false, their emotions then guided their actions. And then their actions led to a result. And that result was probably breaking up, hurting you, maybe regret, maybe gaslighting if they weren't really sorry, like all of this manipulative behavior, maybe toxicness, maybe blame of like, well, if you would have been this, I wouldn't have done that. It's all bullshit, right? Everyone is an adult responsible for creating their own results. And it's nothing that you did or didn't do. And the thing about it is, like, I see sometimes people try to go back and win them over, right? Or like change in order to be what they wanted. And again, if you do that, the only person that you're harming is yourself, because there was clearly a manual or something going on in their brain where they made that decision of, I'm just deciding to take part in this action. I'm just deciding that, right? They decided it for whatever reason, whatever stories. They can blame it on you, but they always had a choice to be responsible, to let you know ahead of time, right? To be like, this isn't working. I'm not happy. Let's separate ways, right? They had an opportunity to create any kind of boundaries in their life for behavior maybe they liked or didn't like, right? So they had full responsibility to be an adult about it. They chose not to. They chose to engage in that kind of behavior. And whether they took responsibility for it after it was over or not, or they blamed, right? Anything that happens in your mind is, again, it's as hard as this is, it's stories that you make up about yourself based on what you wanted from them, what you felt you needed from them. Like, I want them to love me. What do I have to do for you to love me? There's nothing that you can or can't do. They've made their decision, right? Where they made their decision, they chose what they were going to do. And so if you decide to change to, and I'm not saying you are, but for anybody watching this, if you decide that you need to be different in order to make someone happy, or you have to change a bunch of things, what that says is that they're not being responsible adults for their own life experiences. They are blaming you for their emotional experiences. And if you do the same thing and blame them for your emotional experiences, and then you try to change based on being what they want, just like they might want you to change to be what they want, you water yourselves down and you don't show up as who you are, and it will lead to depletion. It will be exhausting for you to navigate day-to-day life, because emotionally you will feel like all of your emotional control is at the hands of someone else, and it will feel like a very powerless thing. So that is something to let people be responsible for their actions without it meaning anything that you've done wrong. Because if you've done something wrong and they're being an adult about it, they're being emotionally intelligent about it, they will come have communication. They will communicate with you before it ever gets shot to hell. They will communicate with you before they break up with you, right? They will communicate with you before they decide they want to date someone else, right? They will be an emotionally intelligent adult. He or whatever wasn't being an emotionally intelligent adult. He made decisions. It led to consequences. It means nothing about you, only what you make it mean. So don't dull who you are to think that you needed to be anything different for his lack of emotional intelligence. Okay. Whoa. Oh my gosh. Sorry. Went on a rant. And I know that that is really, really hard. But again, we have to take responsibility for ourselves. It's up to us to communicate what you need. If you're in a relationship now and it's not working, you need to figure out what's not working. How do you play a part in what's not working, right? Are you getting help on what you might be doing that's not working? So for instance, when I hired my coach, full vulnerability moment, I had a lot of reasons why I hired a coach, but also what made my relationship challenging at times was all of my previous childhood issues with my dad not being in my life, not a great relationship with my stepdad, right? A lot of family trauma. Between all of that, I carried in this perception of, what a man should and shouldn't do. I had all of these manuals and I had all of this blame. So anything that happened argument wise in our relationship, it was always my husband's fault, right? Always. It's like men, and it wasn't ever just because of what he was doing. It was like I had taken all of the stories and all of my experiences that were terrible into my relationship. And subconsciously, what I was doing was sabotaging it, right? I'm going to sabotage it so that I don't get hurt. So I don't have to feel the emotions. Like if it's just me always threatening to like run away or leave, or you need to change, or I'm never going to be happy, right? What it did was take away my work and put it all on him. But that's exhausting, right? So there came a point where I had to really do the hard look in the mirror and say, I know if I don't get coaching on this or get help with this, like I will sabotage every relationship in my life, because the trauma that I've endured is coming with me, and it's coming in these sneaky little tiny ways where it's just causing little bickering arguments, but it doesn't feel good every time it happens, and every little thing turns into a big thing. And I don't want to keep going like this. So I need to figure out my part. I need to figure out what I need to heal. I need to peel my layers of the onion. I need to figure out how to become more emotionally intelligent, take responsibility. And then when I can show up in that way, I will know what parts I need, like what parts were me and what parts might be whatever, my husband's working through, or anybody in my life, any relationship. I'm more clearly now, 7 years later, able to see like what someone else is navigating that doesn't have to be mine. I'm able to stay in my own lane, take responsibility for myself and my own emotions. And when something is not working, I'm able to set very clear, stern boundaries for myself, ways that I will honor myself if certain behavior continues. Other people get to be who they're going to be. Other people get to have the behavior that they're going to have. I know we want to manipulate and change it or blame them, but at the end of the day, you're choosing, right? You're choosing whether you stay and tolerate certain behaviors, or you do the hard things sometimes and leave if they're not going to change those behaviors. But it still comes back to your responsibility and how you're going to show up. Okay. So if you're struggling with any of this, reach out to me. Schedule a free consult at macierenae.com. We will talk through what you've got going on. And if there's a program that is a good fit for you, I will let you know what that is. And if it feels good, we'll move forward. And if not, you can always, I'm always going to be here. So even if it's like not right now, it's something in the future, you know where to find me. Okay. All right, you guys, I'm going to let you go. It looks like there's no more questions. Thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for being here and being present and participating, for being patient during the technical difficulties. I appreciate you so much, and I hope you have an amazing week and weekend. Bye.